Baked Bros presents the Know Your Dose podcast. Join hosts Nadeem Alhassan and Derek Espinosa as they turn the soil on the cannabis industry. With over 10 years of combined industry experience, these two experts will deliver your dose of cannabis, psychedelics, and personal development. Follow on their journey as they aim to destigmatize cannabis, combat the abuse of pharmaceuticals, and implement their altruistic approach into the budding cannabis industry.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And you know what? I'm going to start this off by saying the earth has music for those that listen. Cannabis, psychedelics, and how they can enhance nature. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about nature in this episode. Primarily, we're going to talk about three things. Why is nature important to human health? I don't know. I guess you're going to have to listen to find out. How does cannabis enhance nature? How do psychedelics enhance nature? And we're going to cover that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the science of why and how that happens. So enjoy the show, folks. Hey, man, we live in Arizona. It's a beautiful state here. You know, it's very red. It's not like Texas, where I'm from, where it's very green. Mm-hmm. You know, lots of trees, lots of nature. And I want to talk about nature today. I want to talk about how cannabis and nature coexist because cannabis comes from nature.
Absolutely. You know, I think nature is one of those things that in the West we've kind of, for a large part, kind of taken advantage of, and not advantage of in the sense of, maybe in the sense of like building things and just taking over nature, but I mean, like we just don't think about it as much. And I think part of that is our Judeo-Christian values, right? So, you know, in the Bible, it talks about how man has dominion over the earth. And so, I mean, if that's your fundamental assumption that the earth is mine, is ours to construct, then it kind of separates you from nature. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I feel like most of our society feels that way. We're separate. I mean, just look at the way we construct a city, right?
Yeah,
nature is everything outside.
Right. Right. It's outside the city. It's outside the city walls, right? We live in Arizona, and anybody here in Arizona, they're familiar with the loop, right? The 101 loop. And there's not much nature inside of it, man. There's not. And however, it is really cool where we live because we can go an hour and a half up north, 2 hours up north, and it's like a complete scenery change, right? You hit Sedona and you've got a lot more trees, you've got a lot more forest. You hit Flagstaff, you can get into some deep, thicker forest. You've got Payson, you've got Show Low. So it's really nice to have it accessible. May not be accessible for all.
There's places here in the valley that you can go to. Like on Friday for the summer campaign photo shoot, we were at Skyline Regional Park.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, I'd never been there, and it was gorgeous.
Nice.
I mean, you're in this valley surrounded by mountains, and yeah, it's cactus and, different desert plants, but I mean, that's still nature.
Yeah, and over in Mesa, off like I think it's maybe like off Power, you can get back into where the Salt River fields are, and it's almost like a little clip out of Jurassic Park. I'm not kidding. Like I went back there maybe a couple months ago for a full moon, and me and a friend, we just went and posted up, kind of laid out the some blankets, got in the river, walked in the river. Surprisingly, there was like, it was pretty cool to see, because I thought maybe we were just gonna have like kind of the riverbank to ourselves, but and we did have the bank to ourselves, but over the course of the night, and we were there to like 2 a.m. Over the course of the night, at least 24 people had to have floated by, and we're talking like, so it was like people were going on like moonlit like kayak rides and like paddleboard rides, and in groups of 2, 3, 10. So it was pretty cool to see that, just to see the amount of people getting out there. But that's one of my favorite things to do, man, is kind of go out to that river area. I've been a couple times since then, and just to go on long walks, like hikes, Right. I think I say hike as in like, hiking up this vigorous mountain. No, but like just long walks in the desert, Like it's what I have accessible to me, and there's so many different types of like beautiful botanical flowers. I mean, there's all kinds of different reptiles, fortunately. So recently, man, I was walking or hiking Tum's Thumb, and I was like, oh man, this would be cool, and right as I was going to put in my headphones, I hear a rattle, and I'm like, oh my god. And there, sure enough, dude, there's a pretty good sized rattlesnake, dude. Had to be at least like a 4-footer, coiled up right there under a tree. And I was like, man, and he was right off the trail. Like I would have walked. I mean, so a rattlesnake can strike twice its body length. Okay, so a 4-foot rattlesnake can strike 8 feet away. Exactly. I was a foot away from it, and then I was just like, I'm gonna keep my headphones out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Nature selects, dude.
Dude, totally.
That's a great point, man. Because like, you could look at the situation that we're in and say, how did we get here, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. We should be in nature, right? Especially when you look at the research that says that. But then you have an experience like that, right? Or a mountain lion encounter, or something. It's like, yeah, there's lots of things to be afraid of. There's lots of reasons why we've constructed cities the way we have. But we didn't know the implications of that, right? So, I mean, that's one of the things I'm interested in is how we construct society, and then what are the downstreams effects of that. So,
well, let's kind of cover why nature is so important to humans, right? I mean, other than the idea, not the idea, that the common fact that, I mean, we were born in nature. I mean,
right.
we were. This is where we come from, right? There's something that I want to share. It's called biophilia, and here, I'm going to read it here. It's a hypothetical human tendency to interact or be closely associated with other forms of life in nature. A desire or tendency to commune with natural or nature. Biophilia is the term coined by Harvard naturalist Dr. Edward O. Wilson. And so that, with that said, like that leads me to the idea of grounding, right? So like if anybody listening is familiar with grounding, or you're not, the earth puts off a specific frequency, many different frequencies, right? And so when we go outside and we're barefoot, that energy can flow through us more freely, right? And it can help us meet it can just help us balance us out. I'm not a PhD in cosmic energy by any means, but I do know that this is measured and this is a real thing. And since we walk around in shoes all day, or we just don't go outside barefoot, the rubber soles of our shoes, they block that energy from flowing through us. And this energy has been measured to help mitigate stress, anxiety, depression, pain. It's really, 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 really fascinating. So whenever I can, I like to kind of take my shoes off. If I go to Sedona, when I'm at the river, I go barefoot as much as possible when I'm outside, to be honest.
One of the things I think about, and I'm familiar with the idea of grounding. I haven't looked into the science of it too much, but I mean, just from a practicality standpoint, I mean, you don't see monkeys with shoes on. You know what I mean? And we're also primates, so most of human history, we would have walked around barefoot, at least in part. Now, it makes sense to protect our feet, but does it make sense to protect them all the time? And when you remove yourself from nature, or from the natural world, I mean, we've already seen this with the food we eat, right? I mean, processed food is one of the number one contributors to a lot of the diseases that we're seeing today. It's because it's not natural. Right. One of the things that I think of that, kind of goes in line with this biophilia, this idea, and how far removed we are, is that, people living in cities have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, higher risk of depression, psychosis, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that something's not right.
Well, it's no wonder why people from New York are just assholes. I'm joking, anybody from New York, but seriously, I mean, there's, they've got one park that's like 5 miles long for the whole city. It's right. That's all they got.
Well, and it's even if you make it there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere I think of where thinking of like big cities and why nature is important to us, and someone or why nature is important to humans. I've spoken on Tokyo a couple of times. You know that city's got 37 million citizens. Man, it's
Hmm.
a lot of people. And something that was so fascinating about when I had the pleasure of visiting was the amount of forestry, like the amount of nature that was still okay. So I had asked a question. I was at one of the bars there and asking one of the locals there, and fortunately he spoke pretty good English, and I was talking about it because I went on like a I was shrine hopping instead of bar
Hmm.
hopping. I was shrine hopping. They have almost 1,000 different shrines, and these shrines, I mean, they're just caked with trees and plants and nature. It's just beautiful. And so I was asking him about it, and he said the city, the way, if they want to build a new building in Tokyo, they have to account for how much nature they're going to plant, how many trees they're going to plant, where they're going to plant the trees, because it just helps keep the air clean. It helps keep they know that it helps keep people happy,
Right.
and so I thought that was really cool that they actually take that into account for their city plans when building. And I'm sure there are cities and states here in America that do too, but it was very evident in Tokyo. It was really, really cool, man.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that for me, there's kind of two camps, right? There's always two camps, but there's two camps. There's the one camp that's like, hey, we should, like, cities are fine, that's all good, like, this is progress, and we should continue in that direction. There's another camp that says, hey, we should get back to our nature, and kind of like idolizes the idea of being hunter gatherers. And I don't think either one of those perspectives is correct. And I don't think, when you have two polarized perspectives, either one is ever correct. It's somewhere in the middle, right? Like, we should be
Right,
constructing our cities to, like Tokyo, have as much nature included as is productive,
right,
right? For
right, right,
well-being. Um,
right.
so that's
and,
where I'm at.
and just the overall quality of the air pollution, because we can see, and we do know, anybody who's been to LA, I mean, you can see it when you're driving in. You can see the smog over top of LA and San Francisco. I mean, hell, sometimes you can see it over the top of Phoenix when you're coming down from Flagstaff or Sedona.
Right.
So there is something to be said about that, about the smog or the air pollution associated with just industrial cities or big cities, like China. When I was there, dude, I mean, literally you would get warnings on your phone that would say, hey, air pollution or air quality is pretty low today or pretty bad today, you might want to mask up. And you're just like, geez, but
Right.
it's so industrial there. I mean, they're just, I mean, God, they're factories on factories on factories.
Right.
So I
Air
mean,
pollution kills millions of people every year, and it's something that
right,
we just don't think about. Again, that's part of the reason why we have in cities this increase in cardiovascular and respiratory
right,
diseases. I think one of the things we should kind of talk about is what are the specific benefits of nature, because we
yeah.
kind of highlighted how crappy a city can be. There's benefits to cities. We're not discrediting that, but I mean, nature's pretty awesome too.
Well, yeah, man. So, how does nature benefit your health?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest ways is, and I think this is especially important right now, is nature helps reduce anger, fear, and stress, and increases pleasant feelings. I mean, one thing. I mean, think about this for a second, and we don't have to take this, too far, but you have this lockdown where people are stuck inside, right? And some people
Hmm.
took this to the ultimate extreme, and they didn't expose themselves to nature. And then we have this upwelling of anger, fear, and stress in everybody, right? It has nothing to do with anything going on into the world other than the fact that I'm locked in my house, right?
Right,
That
right,
alone is enough to produce those things. And this is as easy as people just viewing images of nature. That's where the research was done. Just showing people images of nature, it automatically reduces some of those things. On a physical level, it also reduces blood pressure, heart rate, muscular tension, and the production of stress hormones. So you have, psychologically and physically, it makes sense that, like, being in nature is something that you should be doing.
And there was a study done that it was done at a hospital, and it was patients who underwent a gallbladder surgery, and they took patients who had a view of just a wall, and
Mm-hmm.
they had, I think we talked about this a long time ago. I may have heard it from you, maybe like a year ago, and they took patients who had a view of trees. Right, they had a window. They were able to see trees, and according to the physician who conducted the study, the patients with the view of the trees tolerated pain better, appeared to nurses to have fewer negative effects, and spent less time in the hospital. So just to that point, so just from being able to see the
Right.
trees. So next time, God forbid, I have a friend or family member in the hospital, I'm taking them some plants.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Like, where, how do you implement these things in a practical sense? Right? You just said one, which is get some houseplants. Like, that's an
Yeah.
easy way to get nature inside the home. One of the things I do every day when I wake up is I immediately open all the blinds in the house. I
Yeah.
want the
Yeah.
natural sunlight in. I want to see the trees outside.
Mhm.
At night, sometimes my wife will put on nature scenes on the TV as we're eating dinner
Nice.
with some relaxing
Yeah.
music. Like,
Yeah, so I love that. I do the same thing when I wake up. I just kind of like rip open the blinds, let the sunlight in. I look at the backyard. I'm like, nice. I do a couple stretches, but I got these hanging net pots from Amazon. It's like $20, and you get like 3 or 4 of them, and
mhm.
you could put a pot in it. And I planted some. God, I forget the name of the plants, but they're the most common hanging plant from Home Depot. They got all the foliage and the plants hang down. Well, I put 3 of those at 3 different levels in like one corner of my bedroom. So I've got these 3 hanging plants from the ceiling that have this foliage that just hang over. And number one, it just looks really, really cool. But it's like I sleep with those like basically right over my head. And so I think it said per every household plant, it can increase oxygen in your house by like 2 to 5%. And so I mean, I've got, shoot, dude, I think I've got about a dozen house plants in my house. I personally just love plants in general.
Mhm.
I'm drawn to them. Like I really enjoy them a lot. And so Home Depot, dude, they've got just the hanging foliage plants, and they're really easy to take care of too. And that's one way, or one thing that I've done is I've got like air purifiers in my house, but then additionally I've got as many plants as I can get.
Right. Well, I mean, this is a cannabis podcast, and when you're a cannabis consumer, you're cultivating a relationship with a plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about it as the plant. So it's like don't be monogamous to cannabis.
Yeah.
Have a polyamorous relationship with plants and get lots of them inside your home.
That's pretty funny, man. It'd be cool if we could grow here in Arizona, but we can't, because they truly are a beautiful plant. If anybody's ever seen one actually growing, they truly are just an absolutely stunning plant, and a relatively easy plant to grow. Now, the more care and love and attention science you put into it, the better yield and quality it will be. But just in its raw form, it buds, right? People who may or may not be familiar, like it's like my grandma, for instance, she thought you smoked the leaves. Like that's what she thought marijuana was or cannabis was. And I was like, oh my God, you're so cute. And I had to explain that no, there's the male plant, there's the female plant, the male pollinates, the female
Right.
plant, it actually buds. And if the plants pollinate, then you get seeds within those buds. But the buds are what we actually chop down, cure, and smoke. Use as the medicine. All of the full plant can be used as the medicine. The buds are what people are most familiar with.
Mhm.
But if you've never seen one up close or in person, guys, the smell from this thing is just like, I don't know what I can compare it to, man. It's like
Man, it's an overwhelming experience for sure.
oh man, it's like I've always said, there's only 2 things that'll make anybody. If it doesn't make you smile, then you're probably a sociopath. Is a room full of growing cannabis plants or a room full of puppies. Like those 2, like they just make you smile, man. You cannot not smile.
No,
from seeing those.
you're so right. I mean, this is just me personally, but the first time I walked into a grow, because I had read so much and I'd done so much research, but I had never seen a cannabis plant. The first time I walked into a grow, I broke into tears. It was so beautiful, the smell,
Exactly.
and like
That's
you
what
could
I'm
just
talking about.
feel the fucking energy in the room.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
And
That
sorry
that
for the
feeling.
explicitive, but it was that impactful. It was
Yes.
insane.
And you're not wrong, man. I share that with you. One of the most intriguing areas of research is the impact of nature on well being. So one
Mm,
study in mind, 95% of those interviewed said their mood improved after spending some time outside. So changing from depressed, stressed, and anxious to more calm and balanced. And I can personally, attest to this as well. I mean, when I'm frustrated, man, like, dude, long walks. Like,
right,
people underestimate the power of a long walk. I know I opened up in the beginning of the podcast with that, but people truly underestimate the power of a long walk. And so I'm really thankful that I have my dogs, right? Because I walk a
right.
lot more since I have dogs. I probably wouldn't walk as much if I didn't. But I tend to solve problems when I walk, man.
Hmm.
Like, I really do. Like, I do my phone calls when I walk, at least to my family, because I'm generally just happier. Like, I'm just
Right.
flowing. You know what I mean? I'm not just sitting on the couch talking on the phone. Like, I like to kind of, I guess, multitask. But that's something that I personally love to do.
There's a man. It was a Tim Ferriss podcast, and it was a specific researcher. Her name escapes me right now, but there's actually really good research behind the idea of walking to help with your thoughts and creative insight. There's something about bipedal walking that allowed humans to have this increase in cognitive capacity. So outside of it being good for you, in nature, just walking in general. And another thing that I just want to underscore here that I think is super important is, some people could be listening to this like, man, this is a bunch of hippie mumbo jumbo telling me to go outside. Like, I got work to do. I'm trying to make this money. Like, leave that nature stuff alone. But it actually increases your attention span. And if you've tried to work stressed out, anxious, depressed, you'll know that your productivity is not where you want it.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of this science, now is pointing people in the direction like, hey, you could look at this stuff as hippie mumbo jumbo, but the research is backing it up that it makes you more productive, happier, and healthier, which is in turn just going to make you an all around better person to achieve the goals that you have for yourself. So no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, whether you're a type A or something else, this is important.
And to piggyback off that too, when it comes to attention, Andrea Taylor's research on children with ADHD showed that time spent in nature increases their attention span later on. So I mean there's so many other benefits to being outside with your child other than just
Right.
that. But I was a child that was put on Ritalin when I was young, and I can tell you, when I was real young, I didn't spend a lot of time out in nature. Not until I moved to Missouri, and then I spent a lot of time out in nature. And I just so happened to get off the Ritalin too. So
Right.
I don't think my parents knew that, but that largely could have been related to one of the reasons why my behavior shifted as I continue to get older.
I mean, you just think about it, man. You take kids and you put them inside and you allow them outside for 1 hour of the day for recess.
Oh
And
well,
and
just
then you wonder like, wow, these kids are misbehaving. They can't pay attention to anything. It's like, yeah, have you had kids? They're
well,
just
dude, just
bundles of endless energy. Like, they need to be outside doing stuff.
talking about a kid in 1 hour recess. Look at society off of being quarantined. Jesus,
Right.
like we're all
Exactly.
going crazy.
Exactly.
Let us outside. Oh my god. Um, but with that too, with people that are to your point, people that may be saying like, oh, I don't have time for this. Like I had said, I mean, I try and schedule. I do as best as possible. I'm not perfect at it, but I try and schedule my calls for walks.
Hmm.
Like, hey, dude, you know what? Sure, we live in Arizona and it gets a little hot. But dude, breaking a sweat throughout the day has been known and shown to be way more beneficial than just going to the gym once a day, and breaking a sweat. Like, breaking a sweat throughout the day is far more superior than just one time a day. It's
Right.
gonna maintain your blood sugar better. It's just overall health is gonna be
Well,
better.
I mean, Arizona, this is a perfect example. We have like unlimited sunshine. So there's so many Americans who are vitamin D deficient, which,
Hmm.
based on some of the stuff I've heard Rhonda Patrick talk about, is implicated in immunity. So it's like, hey, maybe you should get outside. Well, it's too hot. Well, suck it up. Like there's
Yeah.
psychological benefits to exposing yourself to things that are uncomfortable. This
Right.
is one for me, dude. I used to hate being outside in the sun. I hated it. I did not want to be hot. I just did not want to be uncomfortable. It'd make me irritated. And then I had this experience with psychedelics where I was just bathing in the sun. It was like 110 degrees and I was just soaking it up, and I was like, this is amazing. And it literally transformed that mentality, and now I love that feeling.
Yeah, man, they can do that.
I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Oh man. Well, let's talk of some simple ways to connect with nature. I want to talk about how cannabis and nature, correlate. But since we talked about the cities and suburbs, let's talk a little bit on how you can actually connect with nature. And so one of the things we talked about was letting nature in, right? So opening the blinds, maybe getting some house plants, and really another cool thing is when you have a house plant, it can be really cool. I mean, you're starting something from seed and you're growing it. Like I find reward in that,
Mm-hmm.
So go for a walk. We kind of talked about that stargazing, right? When I was at the river,
Oh man, that's
I
such
was,
a good one.
dude, totally. And it's gonna be, this episode's gonna release in July. So there's a meteor shower. There's a really cool meteor shower. I think the third week of July. You guys will have to look it up. I don't remember the name of it right now. But dude, it's supposed to be like 30 to 45 meteors an hour. So anybody who's down to watch the sky, check that out this month. We also have another solar eclipse. Like, so there's some really cool stuff going on
Right.
on this month, man.
What a great way to just make you question your place in things and how small you actually are, right? We have light pollution, so we don't really see the magnitude of the universe, but when you do get out into nature and you do look up at the stars, it's overwhelming.
Definitely, man. Another good thing to do. So I went up to Sedona and I went to the river. I again another river,
Water.
but the water was like 45 degrees, man. So that was really cool. Just sitting in the water, 45 degrees. It never changes temperature because it's just constantly flowing. So visiting any type of body or water, wherever you are, whether it be a lake, a river, an ocean, long drives are good. Just driving through Flagstaff is always fun for me. I know, like when I went to California, I went to San Francisco. Driving up the coast was awesome, dude.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it was so cool, man.
I have a good experience with that. A while back, sometimes with the family, tensions can get hot. And I told Lila, like, hey, let's just go for a drive. And
Yeah.
we just went and we just drove around, kind of where you were talking about Power Road. There's all, like, if you go down that road, it's just nature everywhere. And
Yeah.
let's talk, let's just look at nature and then, cool off. And it was awesome.
Dude, you're such a good dad.
Hey, man, I'm just trying to make it easy on myself.
Well, outdoor activities, man. You can go camping, right? Camping is a good one. And I won't spend too much time on this, but like I think people underestimate or overthink the process of camping. I
Totally.
know there's a lot of people out there like, I don't like it, can't shower, can't do this, wah wah wah. Toughen up, like get out there, go have some fun, okay? Derek just said, like get uncomfortable, dude. Like it can be really really fun, and it doesn't take a lot. I mean, it really does not take a lot. There's a lot of campsites, especially here in Arizona. There's a lot of available campsites, a lot of campsites near water, a lot of campsites in the woods. A lot of these campsites have little grills already set up. You can cook, you can have fire pits. It's really wonderful.
If for nothing else, one of the beautiful things about camping, it is going to make you appreciate your bed and your home and all the comforts that you have so much more, right? Like you don't know what happiness is unless you've experienced sadness. So, we have these creature comforts inside of our air-conditioned homes. It's like get outside and realize just how wonderful that actually is.
And so if you don't want to do any of those, how can cannabis enhance your nature experience?
Yes. So this is super interesting. I think one of the things that's cool about, well, I guess not cool, but because cannabis is illegal, there's not a whole lot of places indoors where you can consume cannabis, so it automatically predisposes you to consuming cannabis outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was this interesting paper that was written. It was published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology, and I love this title. It says, "A Gateway to Nature: Teenagers' Narratives on Smoking Marijuana Outdoors." Now, the purpose of this is not to advocate that teenagers should be smoking pot. Like we've already discussed multiple times on this show, how in terms of brain development, that's probably not the best idea. But what this researcher did was just sampled a bunch of teenagers who had experiences with cannabis and found that, consuming cannabis outside led them to feel an increase in well-being. They felt freedom in nature. They felt more pleasure. There was an awe of the natural world and meaning in the world. They felt like they were flowing through space. All these really positive experiences. And I think that we can extrapolate that to, adults. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I enjoy consuming cannabis before I go on a hike, or even just sitting outside of my backyard looking at the stars, right? Like cannabis is one of those things that makes meaning more prevalent, right? And it also cuts through the BS too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Well, it has a way of just instilling wonder again.
Yes.
Like it makes you wonder about things. It really does. And that's really good for our creative health. It really is. Like you said, I mean, you're outside and you may be, staring at the trees or whatever on any given day. Or you may be looking out into abyss and not even notice the trees. And I know that sounds silly, but it's very easy to just look right through them. And let's say you had some cannabis use and now you're wondering how the trees move, what they do, like all these weird thoughts. But what I'm saying here is that's wondering. Like you're wondering how these things work. You're wondering why they're there. It
makes you curious.
Yeah. It makes you curious.
You said something, and I think that most people probably miss this, but I think most people do just look at trees as like an object. Mm-hmm. Like it's not this living thing, we have become, because of cities, so detached from nature that it's almost like a decoration rather than an actual thing. You know what I'm saying? And so just to your point, man, when you consume cannabis, go ahead.
So here's the high thought that I had when I was at the river. Okay. I'm sitting on the river. Here's a good story. I'm sitting on the riverbank. And I'm looking out and the moon is shining bright and the moon is shining through this tree. Okay. And I'm looking at the tree and just the way it was shaped and the way the branches were coming out from the tree, it looked like a lung. It looked like a lung. It really looked like a lung with all the veins and arteries and all of it, dude. I'm sure I could Google lung, go to images, and I could find the image of the tree that I'm not kidding. And so like I had this crazy idea and I was like, man, and I told my friend, I was like, isn't it fascinating how like this tree produces oxygen and we breathe oxygen and yet they look the same. It's really cool.
Yeah. So this gets kind of into philosophy a little bit. But I think that, nature doesn't design something and then use a totally different design for something else, right? Like there's adaptation for a reason. And if one form works, right? Like a tree, that looking like, I mean, any tree looks like a lung if you, and so it's the same thing with our lungs, right? Like why would nature create a different pattern, right? Same thing with like roots in your vascular system.
Exactly. It's that same concept, man. It's just like, man, this is bizarre.
So one of the things that's interesting in terms of cannabis is it disrupts what's called your salience network in your brain, which is the region or the network in your brain that ascribes meaning to things. And when that goes offline, you start to ascribe meaning to things that maybe don't have meaning or that you wouldn't normally ascribe meaning to. So you looking at this tree and thinking, oh my gosh, that looks like a lung. Like that's you ascribing meaning that's not necessarily there, a connection that wasn't necessarily there. And that's also why people get paranoid, right? It's like, why is he looking at me? Is he thinking about me?
You're trying to make some type of meaning to it.
Right. That doesn't exist. So it could be positive and negative, but it's interesting.
Well, so psychedelics have a really powerful way of creating a strong relationship between self and nature, right? Mm-hmm. And this is common between a lot of psychedelics. magic mushrooms, LSD, DMT, ayahuasca, mescaline, right? A lot of these which come from nature, and
Right.
and that's something that's always been incredibly, one of the most incredibly fascinating aspects of psychedelics is that feeling of connectedness, right? Whether it be conscious collectiveness or which would embody that feeling of connectedness with nature. I mean, there have been experiences where I felt like I was Velcroed to the grass, and it's just like, or I was sunbathing, same thing, it's just
Right.
like you're just soaking up that sun, and for some reason you're just like, I felt like a lizard, I'm just like I definitely felt like a reptile, just enjoying the hell out of it. But what is it about psychedelics? Because it seems to be a commonality amongst a lot of them.
So there's something that is interesting here. We have what's called our default mode network, right? And this network, so the salience network we just talked about is about ascribing meaning to things. The default mode network is self-referential processing. So when I'm thinking inside my own head about myself and about the future or the past, I'm in the default mode network. When I'm experiencing things in the present moment, my default mode network is all of a sudden quieted. So something like cannabis actually increases the default mode network. So you don't typically have the experience with cannabis where you become one with nature, right? You're more thinking about nature and thinking about what it means to be in nature and about these different thoughts you're having, but you're not melting into nature. When we talk about psychedelics, it does quiet this default mode network. And it's specifically because of its interaction in what's called the medial prefrontal cortex. So your prefrontal cortex is the region like right behind your forehead. It's the front part of your skull. It's the one that's the most developed in humans. That other mammals, we don't see that same
It's the
development.
reason why we build airplanes and cars and can have podcasts and all that happy horse shit.
Reasoning, logic, this strong sense of self, all these things that are really important. But that creates this feeling of separateness, which is kind of an illusion because you're just as much a part of nature as the tree or the bird outside. It's just you think about yourself really differently. So when you take on a psychedelic and it quiets that feeling of self to the point where now all of a sudden you realize and have this expansive experience like, oh my gosh, I'm one with nature. And that's what's happening, is that the boundary between you and nature is the illusory boundary between you and nature is completely dissolved, and you realize what you actually are, which is just a piece in the matrix.
Yeah, man, it's really hard to. I mean, I wasn't gonna say it's really hard to put into words as you just put it into words, but it can get difficult to explain that to individuals that haven't really felt that. And I'm not sitting here encouraging people to go try psychedelics to feel more connected, because that's not the case. I mean, just go camping or just go on a walk.
I was just going to say, so one of the things that we know about being in nature is it quiets that default mode network. It activates that same action pattern in the medial prefrontal cortex, and so does mindfulness. So there's multiple levers that you can pull to have this experience. Psychedelics are just kind of like the master shutoff switch, which not everybody has to do or should do. But I mean, for me personally, it was one of those experiences. It was the first time I ever did mushrooms, and I remember being outside and just going like, "Oh my gosh, this is it. This is the answer." And the person with me was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" I was like, "It's just to be." Like, that's it. I'm already doing it. Like I feel like there's something missing, but there's not.
And so psychedelics have this way of us, and maybe it has to do with that. What was it, salience that you were speaking of? It's like would this apply? I guess what I'm asking here, would this apply to other psychedelics outside of cannabis, that we have this sense of making a connection or a meaning of something? I know that that I have done this with certain experiences where like something has occurred under the or something occurs during the experience that I all of a sudden make this connection and have this epiphany. And if I were to explain it to somebody, like, it would make no sense, right? Like the way I'm holding my pillow or the way I'm moving my hand or something, and all of a sudden it makes this weird connection. I'm just like,
Right.
oh, that's why I feel this way, and it's like, what?
I think that that's a great point, and those are instances where people could that they could use to dismiss the experience. It's like, oh, well, I turned my hand this way and it meant one thing, but I turned it this way and it meant another thing, right? It's easier to hold my hand this way than that way, and that meant blah 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 blah. Someone's like, that's the most insane thing. There's obviously no meaning there. And it's a lot like a dream. Like it really doesn't matter what it means to you. It matters what it means to me. And if that experience gives me lasting impact into the future, well, then that's all. It doesn't matter if it was real or not. What matters is the after effect. And that's where I'm at with psychedelics in general. So back to that experience I had, that profoundly changed the way that I looked at nature long into the future. And the research backs that up. I mean, people who have these powerful experiences with psychedelics in nature, then it's a positive feedback loop where they want to be in nature more so, not necessarily on psychedelics, but because they connected to nature in this way, those impacts are, far reaching into the future.
Nice. Hey man, let's get into the Q&A session, all right?
Excellent.
So one of the questions is, what is the difference between THCA and THC?
Oh man, this is a good one. So we may have covered this on our last podcast, which nobody would have heard because it hadn't been released. So this is a great question. THCA is just it's THC with a carboxylic acid group attached to it. It's what the plant actually produces. So like if you were to eat raw cannabis flower, nothing would happen to you. There's not enough THC, raw THC in there to have anything happen. This THCA is what's present. When you expose that THCA to heat, it burns off that carboxylic acid group and activates the THC. So so essentially you're just left with THC, and that's what we consume in edibles. Now, if you're smoking the plant, right, you're applying fire or vaporization to it. In that process, you're burning off that carboxylic acid, and the smoke you inhale is predominantly THC.
So the next question is, how many cannabinoids are in the cannabis plant, and how are cannabinoids different than terpenes? So, well, we've covered this in the past, that cannabinoids are different than terpenes. Terpenes are essentially the essential oils, and they do have medicinal benefits. But Derek, how many cannabinoids are in the cannabis plant?
So this is a super interesting question, and the line between cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids isn't as clear as we would imagine it to be. They are separate categories, but cannabinoids themselves, I can't remember the exact word, but they're a subclass of terpenes. They're like a special class of terpenes. But in terms of how many cannabinoids there are between 80 and 100 plus, depending on the research. Like that's part of the problem with cannabis being illegal, is there just hasn't been enough research, right? Like some varieties might produce 80 and other varieties might produce 100. And, there's just everything in between.
With that said, though, aren't there like some, I guess, primary cannabinoids that are most abundant in cannabis strains? Similar to terpenes, like there are 5 or 6 primary terpenes that are relevant or prevalent in a lot of strains.
Yeah, so there is like THC is obviously the most prevalent. Then you have CBD. We're now seeing like THC V, and there's CBD V. Predominantly, it's THC and CBD. And what's interesting is when you look at what we call landrace strains, or those strains that are like native to a region that are growing wildly, they actually don't produce that much THC. The upper limit is like 5%. And so humans have taken that and pretty much just upped the ante more and more. And now we have strains today that are 25% THC.
No, we did that.
Yeah, but there's a great argument to make that did we do that, or did the plant do that?
Ooh,
right? Is the plant manipulating us for its own benefit? Right? Like cannabis would not have spread the way that it did and become so quote unquote productive in a Darwinian sense if it hadn't elicited some kind of response from us to make us want to cultivate it more and more and more. So
Oh,
who really
man.
is the master manipulator behind the whole situation? You know what I'm saying?
That's pretty deep, man. But hey, anything's possible. And so that wraps us up for our questions. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review. As always, we truly, truly appreciate it. I hope that you got some valuable tips on how and why nature is important, how you can connect with it. Please, if anything, go pick up a pot plant or a potted plant from Home Depot. And we appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful week. Bye. Hey, everybody. Quick disclaimer. The Know Your Dose podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Let's be real. None of us are doctors. Our content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or public health advice. Please be smart and always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Seriously, never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. That would just be insane.